All right, welcome everybody to today's edition of Freelance Coffee, a podcast series where we interview the most successful online freelancers. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Keener, and I've been freelancing online now for about a decade. And you can learn more about my story over at executiveandsweatpants.com. Today, we're joined by Gall Magril, a top-rated online advertising consultant who's managed over $10 million in ads over the course of his career. Gall, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, Gall, I was looking at your stats on Upwork, and that's how you and I have met. But since joining Upwork as a freelancer, it looks like you billed over 11,500 hours and earned over $700,000 while maintaining a 98% job success rate, which is just awesome. I'm so glad to know you, and I'm in awe of your success. Before we get into how you've become successful, though, maybe we could take a step back and just maybe provide a brief overview of your story and how you got into freelancing.
Sure. So I actually, when I was still an undergraduate student, I started working for a company that kind of gave me a company here in South Florida, gave me a chance to manage some of their PPC ads. And throughout those 3 years, out of the 4 years of my undergraduate degree, I actually worked for them when I wasn't in class, which was, more often than I'd like to admit. So I actually received a lot of experience through that company. And then later on, I just decided to expand and kind of do my own thing. I figured I wanted some independence in terms of the hours that I work, the who I report to. And I also wanted to kind of change up the things I was doing. So I wanted to have different projects in different industries, just to kind of mix things up and keep things interesting. So that's why I decided to get into freelancing.
Cool. So at what point then did you kind of decide that this was going to be a full-time career for you?
Well, I think it's like, basically it's financial, right? I mean, it's, at some point, if you see that, it puts food on the table and it covers, pays the bills, you transition away from what you usually do as a job and you just say to yourself, all right, I guess I'll just freelance every day because it makes financial sense. The desire to freelance on its own, I mean, if you take the financial aspect away, for me, it's the greatest thing in the world because I'm able, again, to have flexible hours. I can travel. I can work from anywhere. So it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So when you were starting to do that work, what are some of the characteristics that you feel like make a successful freelancer?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, it's funny because a lot of these questions, what makes a successful, I can only say what makes a successful freelancer for me. And I'm trying to keep this as modest as I can because everyone has their own, strategy. But I do believe that one consistent factor that everyone needs to have to be a, successful freelancer is discipline. Because you don't have a boss. Basically, you don't have a boss. You are your own boss, and that means that you have to push yourself to find new projects. You have to push yourself to adhere to certain deadlines that you have. And if you don't have that, the discipline and consistency to do it, then I don't think you'll be able to be a successful freelancer. The last thing I will say that I think is really important that I've noticed with freelancing in general is you have to have some thick skin. You're going to come to realize, and I hope this is something that took me some time to learn, but you're going to come to realize that people are different. Yeah. And some people are tougher in their personalities than others. And that's no reflection of who they are or who you are. Just people come from different backgrounds and have different ways to react to things. And if you take everything personal, and each project you take on, you're gonna crumble. So you just have to have some thick skin.
One of the questions that I get a lot is, hey, I get this online consulting thing. It's a real thing, but I'm starting from scratch, right? And I don't have a job success score. I don't have any feedback. What advice would you give for somebody that's just starting out?
Provide free value. I mean, basically what I mean by that is educate yourself as much as you can. If you have no experience in the field, look, we live in a day and age where you can go Google something and learn as much as you can off the internet. And then on that first or second client, you're going to have to, you're not going to get paid what you wanted to get paid. You're going to have to make some compromise so that you can build up a reputation. And later on, you can be more selective with your clients. You can up your hourly rate, but it's a building process.
Yeah, that's another really good point which you could transition to, and is humbling yourself to where you're maybe accepting less than what you think the market would pay you, or what you think you're worth. And then what I've done is I start out one client, at the very beginning, I started out my hourly rate extremely low. And then by working on Upwork, for example, people see that you're successful, and then they invite you to do stuff. And then each new client, I've been able to increase my hourly rate on the new clients. And then eventually, the market kind of dictates where the old clients want to pay you close to what you're making on the new clients. Is that kind of similar to what you've done? Or
that's exactly. And it's funny, I just want to mention, because I feel like for each person, and maybe you felt the same thing, but in that first project, I remember the first project that it was with an Australian client who was selling Mexican products in Australia, which is just I didn't think anybody would buy this stuff, but they had a history of selling things, and they're telling me, what would be the fee for you to set up an AdWords campaign? And I said, it's going to be like $150, which is nothing. I mean, it's absolutely nothing and they agreed to it. I'm jumping up in the air. I was like, I can maybe make something out of this thing. And at the time I was living in France. So I had to make something work, because I was far from family. But as soon as I saw that first project came in, I said, maybe I can actually stretch this time out here in France and still make a living. And it was just really exciting. But you do compromise. If you look, if I look at myself today in that situation, jumping around for $150 for work that's going to take me a month to do, I would have said, you're an idiot. But it was necessary. It was just necessary to do, and it's part of the, it's those building blocks that exist there.
Yeah. Well, I've talked about, in some of my blog articles and in my book, I was at a point where, I was working for a startup, and it wasn't providing what we needed as a family. We were pregnant. Mm-hmm. My wife was pregnant with her first child, and I was looking for anything that I could do. Right. So for me, it was like, any interest that I could get was it was better than nothing, and I would have never guessed that doing this online consulting thing would have turned into a career for me 10 years later. But kind of like you, I look back at some of the things that I did, the $50 project that I would probably never do now because mm-hmm. it's a potential landmine for several reasons. But back then, hey, you don't have anything to lose, right? So there's Absolutely. No risk. There's no Absolutely. Risk. You have nothing in terms of an online reputation. But now, I'm a little bit more selective. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty selective on what I'm willing to take, how, I can kind of read between the lines on the way a client might be based on their invitation even to me.
Yeah. And I think, I think that really is a matter of experience, because initially you're willing to take on just about anyone as long as they're willing to pay you. And you slowly start to, as you gain more experience, you start to realize you can see little red flags with some clients, and that their expectations are extremely high and unreasonable, and they're going to blame you if something goes bad. And you can read that, from the first 10 minutes of a conversation with them. And the other thing I've learned here is, generally speaking, there needs to be a fine line with your rates. I think that's really important to actually mention. If you take a very low price point for a project, you're going to find yourself with, in many cases, in my opinion, with a client who is extremely picky, a penny pincher. And that's, again, it's no reflection of them. They might be in a different financial situation. I completely understand that. But it's just going to put you kind of in a corner, because they're penny pinching. They're really looking at every single thing that you're doing. And especially when it comes to what I do in PPC marketing. Mm-hmm. PPC marketing in general takes time. It's not something that you see results over a week. It takes usually a month, even 2, even 3 months. Right. So if you're dealing with a client who's paying you very little and is penny pinching, he's going to be on you every single day saying, where are the results? And that usually, kind of leads into other things, like you second guessing yourself, not sure if your project is correct, and then the whole thing fails.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that my best clients rarely, if ever, look at your Upwork work diary. I mean, it's kind of there in case they need to go back and audit somebody that's scamming them, is the way that a lot of my best clients look at it. They're not looking at your screenshots constantly and trying to figure out what were you doing in this situation. It's more of they trust the market. They trust the fact that, hey, you've been successful. And as long as you're delivering value, more value than what I'm paying you, it's a great relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Absolutely.
So we've talked about how you've been able to grow your business and increase your hourly rate, which is something a lot of freelancers care about. Maybe talk a little bit about your personal life, and because the thing I found with freelancing when I first started, I was working more than I should have. Let's put it that way, right? And because the temptation is you're getting all these people who want as much hours as they can get in a lot of cases of your time, especially when your rate is low. And the temptation is to just work all the time. And I've found for me, I've had to place restrictions on myself to prevent myself from working more and getting burnt out and providing, at a certain point, it's like you have diminishing levels of value you can provide if you work 90 hours a week. But I'm curious how you've been able to balance that.
You know what? I think that if we would do this interview in a year, I'd have a good answer for you. I'm at a point right now, about 6 years into this, where I'm starting to realize that I've taken it too far. Mm-hmm. And you're spot on. You're absolutely right. When it comes down to, it's human nature for you to say, all right, I put in more hours, I get paid more, I'm making more money. But at what cost? And I think that honestly, these past 2 months, just recently, I started realizing that it's coming at the cost of something. My relationship with friends and family, self-care, taking care of myself. And I also thought that it was if I always block out time to exercise and do yoga and meditate, but that's not really enough. What I mean by that is I've blocked out this time, telling myself you have to dedicate at least an hour of personal time, and it's on the calendar and it's there, and I do it. But I think it's more than that. There really needs, and what I'm trying to adjust to and kind of learn is making that healthy adjustment to knowing when to close the computer at a specific hour, and just letting things go. Right now, the way I'm functioning is I have a time blocked out for me time, but I don't think that's the way it needs to be. It just needs to naturally be, I'm tired, so I'm done. I'm done for the day, and I still haven't hit that yet. I'm trying to learn and try to find like a nice work-life balance, but it's just so tempting. And again, I've been doing this for a while, and it's just so tempting to keep working because you make more money, and then it's and money's great to have, so you just keep going, and it's foolish sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I found too, it's not only bad for your mentality and your physical health. It's also bad because you don't make enough time to learn new things. If you're working 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, you can learn the hard way by making mistakes or something the client sends you maybe. Mm-hmm. But I found that like continuing education time is really, I view it as it's non-billable time. It's something that I should be doing on my own, trying to learn, unless the client says, hey, I want you to go through this training and I'm willing to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
The temptation is if you work constantly, there's not enough time to learn new stuff. And we're in an industry, you and I, to where it's changing so rapidly. I mean, the ad platforms change relatively quickly, and I feel like it's more regulated than it was 5 years ago. So curious what you think about that.
Well, the thing is yes, when I answered your question, I do, and as far as learning new things, my calendar does, and I keep mentioning the calendar, and I think that's such a big thing because, when you said one of the, what trait you should have as a successful freelancer, I think organization is a massive one.
Yeah.
And I do allocate time in that calendar, 30 minutes in the morning, where I'll read articles about new features and things that are happening in PPC. And then what I'm trying to say is I dedicate time to so many different things that revolve around my work, whether it's learning or working on projects or even doing that non-billable, activities that you mentioned in terms of learning and figuring things out. But there isn't any off time. which is what I'm starting to realize is bothering me a little bit, and I'm trying to find that balance there. But as far as our industry and us, this industry constantly changing, 100%. Especially, I'll speak to the stuff that I do predominantly in the space of PPC marketing. We're entering a time, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but we all see all the different policy adjustments being made by Facebook and by Google, and that's as a result of all these scandals with Cambridge Analytica or a bunch of different stories that we hear. If you're not on top of it, and by the way, I'm sure that includes many other facets of the digital world. If you're not on top of it daily, you're simply left behind. And if I would have continued doing what I did even a year ago, I just wouldn't find new projects. I just wouldn't be successful. And you're almost forced to move. I mean, you'd have to go out of your way to do the same thing that you've done the past year without changing at all. The systems don't allow you to stay in the same to provide the same type of service.
Yep. I think we're kind of drawing to the end of our discussion here. So maybe just a couple wrap-up questions here.
Sure.
Somebody that is just thinking about getting into freelancing, somebody that maybe they're working a 9-to-5 job, and they've got a lot of talent, something they've just never taken that step out into the Upwork type landscape. What advice would you give them?
Leave your job. No, really, leave your job, because there is nothing. If you are unhappy where you're working, but you're getting paid every month or biweekly or whichever way you're getting paid, that's almost like a drug. You're basically getting money to stay somewhere, and when you collect that check, you're basically saying, well, I'll stick here just a little bit longer, even though I'm unhappy here. What worked for me, and the reason why I was able to become completely independent by being solely just a freelancer, is by honestly being under the gun and just having that pressure to say, all right, this month, it's kind of like you telling me you had your first child. There's a lot of pressure to provide. The startup you're working at wasn't providing. You have to do something. Yeah. And as human beings, we're going to react. If we're put in a corner, we'll hopefully fight for what's ours, and you just need that pressure. Leave your job, take on these first few projects. It's going to be tough in the beginning, but if you're consistent with it and you're hungry, it's going to work. There's no reason why it shouldn't.
This question I didn't include on our kind of preview, but I'm just curious. A client that is looking to hire somebody like you, let's say that somebody's listening out there that's a client. What are the types of specific things that they should look for in somebody that has your skill set, somebody that's an online advertising expert?
Honesty. And what I mean by that is, time and time again, I'll have prospects come up and say, what kind of results do you think I can get? Well, an honest and experienced digital advertiser will tell you, look, I don't know your industry. I don't know if your price point is competitive. I don't know if the funnel in your website is built out properly. That's me personally. I know that you deal with many aspects of the entire funnel, you personally. But myself, it's really a concept of I can only control one part of this. I can promise you to deliver the right people to the website, but the website has to play its role after that. And that's why me as an advertiser, I can't promise you, what conversion rates would look like, what the return on ad spend can look like. And anyone who does and only deals with the advertising aspect of this, I'd be very wary of them, because they're either being dishonest or they're inexperienced. It's very hard to promise results in our space without having full control of everything.
Yeah. And I think that that's why in what you and I do, where we're kind of independent contractors, we're not part of a conglomerate agency format. It is so important for us, for people like you and me, to have these types of relationships, because if you're dealing with nothing but one-off clients who have in-house marketing departments who are not very, responsive to your needs as an advertiser, it's going to limit your successfulness as in what you do, right? But if you and I are working together, and for those of you who don't know, I'm kind of a marketing manager, specializes in digital projects. Gall can come to me and say, hey man, we're not going to make this LinkedIn campaign is not going to work unless we have some incentivized content. You need to come and get me that as soon as possible, right? And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing here in the freelancing world, where these relationships are forming, and we can learn from each other's clients and kind of lift each other up.
Well, that's I also want to end with that is I think that as I'm gaining more experience, these strategic partnerships with other freelancers is, like you said, it's so critical. One, for us to have more control over the success rate that we have with clients, and two, you're going to come to find out that there's many of my clients that are looking for Matt's services, and there's many of Matt's clients who are looking for my services, and there's just kind of it can lead to a very great partnership. So I completely agree with that.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Gall, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. And everybody else, be sure to check out executiveinsweatpants.com for additional freelancing and outsourcing tips. So until next time, everybody, have a great day. Thanks.